We are all witnessing the writing of a true history in Syria together. Syria is experiencing historic days, and most recently, the YPG, with let's say the PKK in Syria, agreed with Colani and decided to hand over their weapons to the army. Deniz, can you explain what is in these 8 points? We had mentioned it before. It still seems unbelievable to many people because they thought such an agreement would not happen. That seemed impossible. However, be sure that the Turkish state has a very significant role in these signed agreements. In other words, like a mentor or a coach, Turkey's intelligence and Ministry of Foreign Affairs have currently shaped this process. So what do these 8 points ultimately say?
There are very important points, but as you said, this wasn't reached all at once. It has a history. We saw the first data regarding this agreement in February. The Syrian Democratic Council, the political wing of the Syrian Democratic Forces, had announced a protocol in 8 points. These were almost similar to those points. So it's not really a surprise. What happened yesterday? The leader of the Syrian Democratic Forces, Mazlum Kobani, first went to Homs. From Homs, he reached Damascus with a helicopter belonging to the US and held a 1-hour meeting with Ahmed al-Shara. And as you mentioned, they agreed on 8 points. The first 3 points of the 8 are generally related to the constitutional rights and representation of the Kurds. But the 4th point was particularly critical. Why? Because all military institutions, border crossings, airports, and oil and natural gas fields under the control of the SDF will be integrated into the Syrian state administration. This might not be understood when we say it like that. Let's give the rough figures. The oil power is close to $300 billion. Perhaps the Syrian Democratic Forces control 25% of the land, but they were controlling 80% of the oil wells. Referring to their armed force, they had an armed forces consisting of 70,000 people. And most importantly, the fate of the ISIS prisoners was being discussed because nearly 10,000 ISIS prisoners were in the territories belonging to the Syrian Democratic Forces. This was very important. Even in Europe, they were emphasizing this by constantly referring to it to prevent any conflict among you. With this agreement, this integration will now be completed.
Now, when you look at it at first glance, it seems like this. Why did the SDF do such a thing? But when you look at the SDF, there's actually a big gain here for the SDF. I mean, for the YPG. Because right now, as you said, they were already holding control over a large part of these oil fields. But it was impossible for them to hold on to these in the long term. What would happen? A war would break out. I mean, those guys wouldn't leave that oil to them. That's why there's actually a win-win situation there. I mean, they gained a power, both materially and morally, that they might not even dream of. I mean, this agreement should also be read from the perspective of Öcalan's statement. I mean, because in the end, the SDF was already going to lay down arms. I mean, some people can't comprehend it. Will the YPG lay down arms or not? Does it include Syria or not? It includes it 100%. I mean, not 90. It included 110%. That's why they also found such a path now. Actually, they are not laying down their arms. They are keeping their weapons. But as far as I understand, they are integrating into the Syrian army. So within an army with their weapons, it will be like a new army, you know. I mean, like we have the first army, second army, third army. Syria will probably move towards such a structure. This won't be called an autonomous region, or it won't be a state, but, you know, some fourth army or Syria's second army or first army will be a group composed of Kurds. I mean, as far as it goes. But right now, this agreement is a good one for Turkey as well, because ultimately, Turkey's counterpart will now be Syria. It will be Colani. Well, Colani is already someone who has extremely good relations with Turkey, from Ibrahim Kalın to Hakan Fidan. And as I mentioned earlier, is almost mentored by Turkey, like a life coach saying, look, do this like this, do that like that, guiding him. In that sense, I think a very important step is being taken here right now.
Correct. There is even an article concerning Turkey. The 5th article, it states that all Syrians should be enabled to return to their towns and villages. It's important because it mentions all Syrians, not just those displaced within Syria, because the number of internally displaced Syrians is 7.2 million. According to some sources, the number of Syrians living abroad ranges between 7 to 8 million. And a significant portion of this, nearly 60%, is in Turkey. This is also facilitated by the 5th article. The 6th article is again one of the most critical ones. Support will be provided for combating any threats against the remnants of the Assad regime, its security and unity. In other words, the Syrian Democratic Forces and the Syrian Central Authority will provide this support together. Who are they talking about here? Well, there was a tension that occurred in recent days. Civilians also lost their lives in Latakia and Tartus. There is a unit formed by soldiers who have broken away from Assad there. The Military Council for the Liberation of Syria. There is even Mukafa Fatiha to Assad's prominent soldiers. He himself had released a video under the name of such a rebellion. With the 6th article, the guarantee of conducting a joint operation against the structures here is secured. It is anticipated that all these articles will be completed by the end of the year.
Now, for example, we should not underestimate these guys at all, because ISIS, of which Colani was once a member, was established by Saddam's soldiers after Iraq fell. I mean, not only in Iraq, but they later expanded their area. We will seize both Iraq and Syria. They set out with the intention of establishing a state in Iraq and Syria, but they were all soldiers in the past. That's why when I said yesterday that a belated war is happening right now, that's what I meant. Maybe we explained it incompletely. We couldn't fully convey what happened to the Syrians, because right now it looks like a sectarian war. However, we know when you look at it, the Alawites, and despite being a minority in Syria for many years, were the ones who governed Syria, and the most trusted soldiers and army of Assad were composed of them. And we don't know why. We all said perhaps there was a coup. I mean, they suddenly started marching, and then Homs fell. They came to Syria, they entered. In 3 days, they reached Damascus. This was something contrary to the normal flow of life. And right now, perhaps we are witnessing a delayed reckoning of a war in Syria. Therefore, the coming together of these elements actually provides that unity. I mean, in the coming days, it seems like something that will also prevent sectarian clashes. Jolani, for instance, our conservative, or rather our opposition group, hates Jolani. They see him as, as a former Al-Qaeda member. But it's a bit like this. I said in the early days, we can't seem to make you like the revolution. I mean, the man is making a revolution. You say the man made a revolution, overthrew Assad. No, it didn't work. His wife wears a headscarf, or he has a beard, or whatever. Well, this is already the old thing. Well, brother, this is the geography. I mean, what are you expecting? What do you want? Do you expect Norwegians to suddenly come in and take over the administration of Syria? I mean, there's a Kurd, an extremist, a less religious one, an Alawite, a Turkmen. Somehow they need to come together. I mean, saying you don't like them and don't want this or that, doesn't mean anything. And there's no point in saying it anyway. Now, Deniz, do you have anything to add? I will move on to Arda, because we should talk a bit about Jolani with Arda. Do you have anything to add?
Let me conclude by explaining the complexity of the region. After the recent events in Latakia and Tartus, the Israeli side reacted and published a photo of Jolani, labeling him as an Al-Qaeda member. When you look at it from a bird's eye view, we are talking about a leader who is actually condemned by both Iran and Israel. So whose hand is in whose pocket? It's a very tangled geography.
The only thing we know is that Turkey is currently showing its influence over Jolani. So as you said, both Iran and Israel are condemning at the same time. Meanwhile, Israel is still striking the south of Syria. So there's that too. So that hasn't ended either. I mean, it still finds the Druze and other groups it sees as rivals there. Let's say Hezbollah and its various remnants.